Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I made this wedding cake at work 2 weeks ago. And it featured a marbled fondant faux tier on the bottom and some fondant macrame over buttercream on the top and over the fondant on the bottom. And I added some texture to the fondant as well. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is get our cakes ready. So I had leveled these and I had simple syruped them, and I used a thickened buttercream dam all the way around so that the filling did not seep out of each tier. And then I set them in the refrigerator to firm up while I'm working on the next tier. Now I had rolled out a marbled piece of fondant, this smaller piece of marbled fondant, the night before. I used Marbled Concrete on that, and I wanted it to form a crust. So I left it overnight and then I blowtorched it with my creme brulee torch just to add a little bit more of a crunchy layer to it. And then I put it aside to cool down and firm up again. And now I'm getting that piece that we had done ahead of time crumbled up and ready to be used to add some texture to your cake. Now remember to do this the day before so that you have time for it to get nice and crunchy to get that really pretty texture. Now I'm mixing the concrete by Color Mill into my fondant. I wanted to get 3 different shades, or different, a variety of shades in it. So I'm adding different amounts to each piece, and here you can see kind of the layered up different shades that I achieved. And then I'm just twisting them and kneading it and just kind of getting those colors incorporated without over incorporating them, and then adding some of our dried pieces to add that texture while I'm kneading it. And then I did go in and add some to the top as well. Now that piece on the top there, that's going to go on top of our tier. And I'm just using cornstarch to keep it from sticking to my board. Now just make sure that you have that rolled out so that it's a little bit bigger than the top, so you can cut that extra off. And I'm just attaching it with some shortening and just pushing it out to the edges, and then set it aside while I roll out my long, big piece. Now this is a big tier, so it's gonna need to be long and tall. And there you can see that marbling a little bit better there. I think it turned out really pretty. And then I'm cutting off the extra because I measured the height and the circumference, and it pretty much filled my entire quilting board there. Yeah, I needed it to be that big. And then I just removed the extra. And this is a little trick on how to get this attached on a fake cake, is to go ahead and just put some shortening on the piece of fondant. And I had flipped that over, you didn't see that, so that the right side was out. But yeah, that shortening is going to get it to stick to your cake just fine. You don't have to use buttercream. You don't have to use water. You can, but I just prefer the shortening because you can move it if you need to. And now I'm using my macrame pieces. This is that knit piece mold, silicone mold that you've probably seen me use before if you've been watching me for a while. I tend to break this one out in the winter because it is perfect for this. And I need to make sure that the piece that you put in there is thick enough to pick up all of those details. And then I like to turn it over and press down from the top also. That way you don't miss any of those little details that make all the difference in the end. And did I say I dusted it with cornstarch? Well, I did, to keep it from sticking. And then I just cut off those ragged edges. Those aren't ragged. They're made that way to interlock, but I don't need it for that, for this one. So, and I'm using my grid on my mat to measure out so I know where that middle point piece will need to be, and just remove those extra pieces. Then I'm rolling out a log, and I'm using my macrame silicone mold because it has the rope impression in there that I wanted. And roll it in there, press it in there with your fingers, remove the excess. And it is dusted with cornstarch as well. And I'm using those pieces to edge out our knit piece for the top tier. And I just attached them with water. And here is where I did something that I did change. I had planned on just using the tassels that are on this mold, and I put them on, and then I thought about it overnight and I changed them because the proportions for me were off. I didn't like the proportions. But if you do end up using these, just go ahead, and I'd like to cover all my fondant pieces in saran wrap just to make sure that they don't dry out too much while I'm needing to do other things before I can attach them. They can dry out a little bit, but you don't want them to dry out too much. And then I made a bunch more of the rope molds because that bottom tier is going to have a lot of interlacing rope pieces. So I just made enough. I kind of eyeballed or thought ahead about how many I might need and then make one more just to make sure you have enough. These pieces are pretty quick to make as long as you keep in mind a few things. Don't roll out your snakes that you're putting in there too thick because it's going to take you longer to remove the excess pieces, and use your fingers to push them in there. And some helpful hints on your extruder is I used the multi-hole one. Line it, coat it with some cornstarch, the whole extruder on the inside, and make sure you add some shortening to your fondant, because if you're having problems pushing that fondant out of an extruder, it's because it's too stiff. So if you add shortening to it, and quite a bit, it will give it more elasticity and make your job a whole lot easier. I can't tell you how many calluses I've had on my hands trying to force the fondant through a small hole in an extruder before I figured that out. So learn from my mistakes. And then I just kind of let them sit for a few minutes so that I could loosen up the strands, and then just laid them out flat. And then I'm just cutting off the extra pieces. Try to keep in mind too how long you want these. Keep your measurements in mind as you're assembling these pieces. Then I'm using my fondant smoother to kind of squish them together at the top. And then I remove the excess pieces. And then I rolled out a piece of fondant, a strip of fondant, to kind of line it. It's kind of like when you're making clothing, you know, when you have fringe, your fringe is attached to something, right? So I attached them with water to these pieces of fondant and just set those aside while I got my cake assembled, and then I will attach them. And again, I'm just using the hot glue gun to attach that bottom tier to the board. Not going to be eaten, so it's fine. And then I did not need any dowels since that bottom tier is foam. So I just attach it with buttercream and then filled in the gap and remove the excess and clean it up as best as you can. It's kind of hard to get that completely perfect when you have one color on top of another color, and I know that. I think doing less is more with that. Using a smaller hole in your piping bag to fill in that gap. It makes it a little easier to clean up. You don't accidentally get too much. And then on this tier, I did cut all my straws to the same height, added some more buttercream, and I only did 5 straws because that's just a 6-inch on top of an 8-inch. And again, filled in my gap and removed the excess. And I just used buttercream to attach the fringe. It was really that easy. You kind of have to commit, though, when you pick it up. You don't want to pick it up and move it around too much because you don't want pieces falling and breaking off. So just pick it up and just get it on there. You can move it around a little bit once you get it on there. Then I attached that top macrame knit piece with some buttercream also. And I'm just making sure that everything's kind of stuck together there. And use a little water where you need to make sure that your pieces aren't dangling around and cracking and falling off. And now I'm just eyeballing the arrangement on the bottom. I know I wanted these pieces to be kind of interlacing and just kind of have that diamond look to it. So I'm just laying one piece on top of another and then cutting off the piece that overlaps, a little 1/4-inch section so that they kind of interlock a little bit more, because I knew I wanted those pieces that I'm putting on right now to go like horizontal there. So I wanted to take that bulk off before I attached that piece. And I mentioned in my last video that I prefer for my cake boards to be finished with fondant. So this time I did go ahead and do it. It only takes a little bit of product and a little bit of time. Just roll it thin. And then I shaped it in a U after I cut it to the width, and then used just shortening on the board and wrapped it around, cut off the excess, used some double-sided tape for our ribbon, and ta-da, it to me looks finished. And then I'm just using some water to attach these tassels. You can see I took the original ones off. I kept the little round tops. They're in front of me right there on the table. I kept those, and I'm going to use those to camouflage where the tassels attach here. I could have done the same thing I did with the pieces up on top there across the horizontal way, but you know, it's another element of texture. So I just kind of use my Dresden tool to kind of push them into place and make them look like they are joined together. Like that is intentional. Kind of tucking everything underneath there. Sorry about my head in the way. The angles are so hard. And now I'm just attaching some silk flowers. These are my silk flowers. I didn't take it to the venue, so I didn't have it finished. I need to have my cakes finished to show you guys. So I just made little arrangements with my silk flowers, and I attached them with buttercream that can easily be taken off. And here's our finished product. I hope you liked it, guys. I really do still like the macrame, and I thought this one was a little different because of the concrete look on the bottom and the color scheme. It's more of a fall one, and I thought that made it a little different. So I hope you liked it, and I hope you learned something. Hope you got something from it. And please take time, like, share, and subscribe. Guys, we're kind of stuck at a subscriber count, and I want to get that going again. So please help me out, help a girl out, share it, let people know about me, and I really appreciate it. And we'll catch you on the next one.